Hello, and welcome to Through the Monocle. Today, to begin our first cycle, the Space Western cycle, we are talking about Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. As always, I am your host, Grant Ingram, and joining me today is my personal favorite co-host, Mr. Grant Skillen. How are you doing, Grant?
I'm doing good, and I'm really the only one. So favorite of one, I guess. So I'll still take it, but
I mean,
not
you could
much
have
of an
been my
honor.
least favorite.
Again, least favorite of one. So
Fair enough.
before we get into that, though, if you didn't catch it at the end of the last episode, we are doing a cycle of episodes.
Yes.
So A New Hope. So the one we did last week with The Dark Knight was kind of its own standalone one. But starting today with this one, we're going to have a cycle. Ooh, I think I did the exact same thing in the other one.
Space magic.
Yes, this one is Space Westerns. I don't have the list right in front of me.
I happen to know it off the top of my head.
Perfect.
So this week we are doing episode 4. Next week we are coming back with John Carter as sort of our under the radar hidden gem. Then we have our cult classic, which is Starship Troopers, followed finally by our certified rotten, which is Cowboys and Aliens. 2 of the 4 movies have Harrison Ford in them. Not a bad way to end it. Bookended.
Mm-hmm. Technically a bad way to end it, but yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen the movie yet. Anyway, so with that out of the way and my painful blunder cut, hopefully by this point. If not, I'm sorry. Just consider it a Lucasine edit. Grant, what did you think of A New Hope, just generally?
I mean, it's a very good movie. Of course, it's a movie that came out over 40 years ago at this point.
Gosh, yeah.
So it's not like a new Avengers movie where they've got a bunch of CGI and a bunch of stuff. It's very much practical effects. I think they may have done some CGI. Yeah, but mostly some of that is put in after and more recently, which is probably for the better. And some of the stuff allows George to kind of do what he wanted to do originally, maybe, but wasn't able to do.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's obviously a great movie. There's a reason that from this one movie alone, we have had for 40 years just a franchise of movies, TV shows, just everything that has come from this one movie has been incredible and it's well deserved.
Yeah, I completely agree. I will say, watching it, it does not feel like a franchise movie. Like, it wraps up, the movie ends, and that is a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, and I mean that's what it was supposed to be. I don't think George Lucas had in mind, I'm going to make 6 movies and we're going to make 6 seasons of a TV show and we're going to make, I said 6 movies. I was going to say the prequels. I mean the prequels. He had to have some backstory in mind to get the story across, just in A New Hope. He hadn't thought, I don't think, this much into it of what all was going to come from it.
See, I kind of am going back and forth on that because in 1981, which is the year I believe that episode 5 released, Star Wars, as it was known, got redubbed. It became episode 4, A New Hope.
Well, yeah, at that point, yes, but I think when he created the movie, I mean, he didn't know at that point that Luke and Leia were brother and sister.
Yes.
And I mean that they were Vader's son. At that point, it's just, okay, we have this kid who's force sensitive. If there was, I don't think, other than Darth Vader or Father, spoiler alert, which I don't think even German people would have thought much of that. For those who don't know, Vader, I believe in German, is father.
Right.
But at that point, I don't think he'd even decided on that. So don't quote me on that. I might be wrong.
I believe at this point, the only person who knew Darth Vader was Luke's father was David Prowse, because it got him kicked out of every Star Wars convention because at some point he was asked where the story went next. And he's
I'm saying I don't think George Lucas knew at this point. At the point A New Hope came out, I don't think he knew that.
I know. I'm just saying. I'm telling this story because that's what got David Prowse kicked out of Star Wars conventions. He announced that Vader was Luke's father before Lucas had announced that Vader was Luke's father because he apparently knew it before Lucas did, which is crazy.
Or he was just saying something and it came true. Maybe Lucas used that as inspiration. Would he ever admit that? Probably not.
No, the king of the retcon, right?
Yeah, but I mean, kind of just back to the movie. Everything's done well. Um, you have action. You have sad moments. We all
Yeah.
kind of know what that one is. But even that's done well. That one's funny because you can see the when they did the lightsabers, then they had you could see the cord sticking down in the Obi-Wan's pocket.
I didn't see that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I love how well we'll get there in spoilers. I'll talk about it specifically because I think it's hilarious. But yeah. Do we want to jump the spoiler wall?
I mean, we can. Do you want to say something a little bit more about what you think of the movie before we hop in?
I think it's fantastic. Like honestly, it is my like watching it. It does not feel like a Star Wars movie, if that makes sense. Like it's just very.
It's a good movie.
It is very good, but it does. It's like it's lacking the major spectacle that Star Wars movies are characterized by, and I think it succeeds because of that. Like I really enjoyed Rogue One, and Rogue One is that same type of movie.
Yeah,
it's smaller, and I like that.
It's more simple.
Yeah, because
and that's not to say anything bad about 5 and 6 or the prequels. Although the prequels are much more hotly debated. But I think there is something to be said just about the simplicity and just the nature of how the movie was done, and just George Lucas just want to make a good movie and not make it too over the top.
Right, and it's weird. Like I've seen some of Lucas's other works, Howard the Duck, for example, and it all kind of fits. And then you watch 5 and 6, and then the rest of the monstrosity, and it's a very different feeling.
Yeah, I think part of that feeling is when you're working how he did, and like I was saying earlier, I don't know how much of it he had thought out. He then is like, okay, we've made 4, we built on that with 5 and 6. Then do you continue, or do you go back and tell the backstory? And if you continue the backstory, then you have these pieces in place. You can talk about this kind of with all the new Star Wars stuff. When you have where people are at this point, and you're making something at this point, then you can't do anything that violates getting you here.
Right. And it's very interesting, like how well he managed to do that with the prequels. Love him or hate him, he did connect it very well. I do think it's entertaining at the very least. And I had never really realized that he did. Upon releasing episode 5, he went ahead and decided that was episode 5. And episode 4 was episode 4, even though we were still nearly 15 years away from episode 1. Which is nuts.
When did episode 1 come out? I forget.
I want to say it was 99. It was actually a little over 15. That sounds right, because I know episode 3 came out in 03, so maybe it was 95. It was yeah.
It was 1999.
Yeah, I was right. Wow. That almost never happens.
You're not right, my dude.
I said 99 or maybe 95.
Or you said 15 years from 81.
Yeah. I said I think it was 90. Anyway, regardless.
Cut.
Stop embarrassing me on the internet, Grant. I do that well enough myself. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that he had all that planned. Now, what we know then, or what we know now that he had planned that he hadn't told us was Rey Skywalker. But what are you gonna do?
Star Wars, the midichlorians. He actually talked about the midichlorians even back then. That was something that he had in mind. But we've been talking about. Let's just talk about the movie now.
Yeah, let's just jump the wall. So, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. All right. So, getting into it, the movie opens up. We see, the famous opening scene on site or on board of whatever that ship is called. The name is now currently escaping me, where Vader comes in and chokes all the rebels, right? Or kills all the rebels. There's more to it than that. I'm being very simplistic. And we eventually get to Tatooine, and stuff happens on Tatooine. I'm getting to one clip in particular I want to show if I'm jumping, whatever. So stuff happens on Tatooine. Luke meets Obi-Wan.
Ben Kenobi.
Right, but he's always known Ben, but he meets Obi-Wan.
The same person.
Right. And then he returns home after realizing that these droids he bought had been tracked. And
Look at me, stuck on this crappy planet, and Uncle got burned up like chicken cutlets. What are you gonna do? Me, personally, I'm gonna save the galaxy and make out with my sister.
And that.
Yep.
Pretty much verbatim. If you listen to Mark Hamill, that's exactly what he sounds like for that scene. Yeah.
Maybe not the last part. I don't think he mentioned that, but
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just the accent and everything's just perfect. It's right on.
love Mark Hamill. However, that might be more well acted than Mark Hamill in this movie.
Yeah,
We'll cut that so we don't potentially lose the ability to get Mark Hamill.
Well, I mean, I think even he would admit it's not the most well acted thing he's done because episode 5 was way better. Yeah.
All around, yeah. And I think at that point, that's because hey, let's put more effort in this because this is something that's staying around. And I mean, the fact that it's still around and the fact that Mark was even back for Mandalorian, although it doesn't look like it, when like in season 2, I want to say it was at the end, that was him standing there. They used CGI, but they actually brought Mark Hamill back and had him standing there.
I think he's still back. Like I don't think all the stuff that they're doing, I think is still him.
Yeah. I thought they had someone else for the face though.
They might.
I don't think it was just de-aging. I'm fairly sure there was someone else. Like I know for sure, like the action scenes, even in that episode at the end when he gets revealed, that's not him fighting. That's someone else fighting.
Right.
Doing the choreography.
I think he's the one there speaking. I don't think they're just ADRing him in.
Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting things is this movie had like massive budget cuts, and there was a lot that they had to do. There were not budget cuts, but it had like a really tight budget. Like it went $2 million over, and then they had to scramble to find the funding at the end of the movie, which was crazy. It only cost like $11 million, which is nuts.
Nuts. Just to think about, but
yeah, you can tell if you look at some of the original like work.
Yeah, I think Grant's got an example he's wanting to pull up of our good friend
Jabba.
the Beast himself. Copyright.
So 1977. Up here at the top, you see Han Solo yelling at a man in a fursuit. That was supposed to be Jabba the Hutt. Lucas was not happy. So he
for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different movie entirely, right? That movie almost looks like a gangster movie in space where it's like very non-alien based. Anyway, regardless. 1997, CGI is just invented. George Lucas has a new toy, and as we've all seen from episode 1, it's not good.
Yeah, and George liked to use it, but didn't know how to use it well, for being honest. Sorry, George.
Yeah, and so we get this monstrosity here, and it looks terrible.
Yep.
And then in 2004, a mere 7 years later, he still likes CGI.
Except this one's actually somewhat decent.
It's
better. It's better.
Honestly, it might be better, but the 97 one at least looks out of place. This one gives you kind of like an
uncanny... The 97 one looks like an overweight slug. 2004 at least looks like a different being entirely.
Yeah, but like...
And then 2019, I think that is just better lighting.
It's literally a 4K scan. Yeah, it's the same thing. The deal with it was, though, like when he redid it, it threw it into like what Jar Jar is in episode 1. I don't know if you've ever noticed Jar Jar. He's obviously not
you can't miss him. You cannot miss him.
Like, even if you're just watching it, he is obviously not there. Like, there's something off with the lighting or the texturing or something where if you're watching it on film, he is obviously not present in that shot. So they did the same thing with Jabba in 2004, and that wasn't really present in the 97 version, which is why I say 97 might have actually been a little better, even though it looked way worse. Personally, why not just use the puppet, George? You had the puppet. Why not use the puppet?
And he used puppets well with the little green midget that's in episode 5 and 6.
And they're still using puppets. Why not use the puppet for the big dude that you already had made for 5?
Yeah. Was it already made at that point?
Yeah, because he was in episode 5.
Yeah, but he may not have made the puppet in 4 before he knew there would be more. And once he realized, oh, hey, there's an audience for this, then had the puppet made.
No. I'm saying instead of the CGI thing,
Oh, yeah.
just use the puppet.
I mean, they went back and got our boy Ian McDermott, put him back in as Palpatine.
He was actually Palpatine the whole time. He was literally cast as Palpatine originally.
Well, they had the different old guy first, right?
That's right. They had the old woman that was... Yeah, you're right. They also brought in Boba at one point. I can't remember if it was in the version we just watched or not. I'll be honest. I looked down a couple of times. I might have missed him. But Boba was not originally in episode 4, and he was added in, and I want to say the special edition.
I think he was in this one. I think it was just a brief cameo. I think you just see him briefly. We might be wrong, but...
Right, but they like added that in as like its own filming thing, which is just odd to me. I don't know. We were talking about that amongst the cultured nerd people, and like everybody, like Lucas apparently considers this one canon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see any difference in the canon between them. It's just I prefer it when
it was like, I think it was John was saying in the Slack was it's Lucas's story. He can go back and make changes, and what he does is canon. And some of the changes are just him trying to improve stuff, like the change of Jabba. That's just him trying to improve what Jabba looks like. Boba, that's different than that, but that's just him trying to improve it, and so he has every right to do that. As the creator and mastermind behind the good parts of Star Wars, not including like a Mandalorian and Rogue One, but
the thing I think about it is he does have that right. The problem becomes when he goes so far that it almost kind of ruins it. Like, I like the Jabba idea where he's reinserting a thing that he had already filmed and obviously wanted to be there. Mm-hmm. But then there goes to be a little too far where you're just like, George, just reshoot the movie. Just remake it at this point. Why are we adding in Boba Fett? Like,
I mean, he hasn't made changes. It's not like the difference between the like Zack Snyder's movie for Justice League and the other one. It's not like that. It's going in and adding Boba, going in and changing what Jabba looks like. It's not at all the same, in my opinion.
Yeah, but part of the thing I think ticks fans off is that he wipes away the other one when he does it. So, like, for example, the Disney Plus version is the 4K version, which is fine, but it's not the special edition, which is a different thing entirely, and it's not the originals, which I happen to own on VHS. But like, you can't find those. Like, it's not like I can go watch George Lucas's A New Hope.
I mean, we still are.
Yeah, but I can't go back and watch the studio cut. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's a...
Yeah.
I mean, it's a minor thing. It's a McClunky in the space of the universe. But,
yeah, I think it's different if they go in and add like if it's like go in and add 30 minutes of the movie, that's different. Or like just anything like that. Like I said, the difference between like Zack Snyder's Justice League and the other one is huge, even though it's still technically the same movie.
It's not the same movie.
It's not the same movie. It's so different because of all the added stuff that it's a different movie. And I haven't seen it, so I don't know if there's other differences of like he actually like changes parts of the story or not.
Well, there's an entirely different villain.
Okay, like that's an entirely different movie. I wouldn't say the difference between the original A New Hope and now what we have with Episode 4 on Disney Plus. That's not entirely different movie.
I mean, fair enough. It's just the constant tweaking is weird. Personally, I wish he'd go back and do it to the prequels. It'd make episode 1 and 2 much more watchable.
Just take Jar Jar out. Just burn him on the stake, and I think we're fine.
Leave him in, but put some decent CGI behind him, and that movie becomes watchable. Make it such that like it doesn't look...
Change the voice. Fake. I mean, it's the voice for me is so annoying. And if you want him to talk like that, fine, but just get a different voice.
I mean, the Darth Jar Jar thing apparently was a real thing.
It was a real thing.
People got annoyed.
Yeah, this is kind of off track, but for anyone who doesn't know, the actual original plan for Jar Jar Binks, and it's been confirmed by the actor, was Jar Jar was going to be a Sith Lord. But because of the backlash and just the well-deserved backlash in the fan reaction, George scrapped that.
And I want to make clear, I believe the actor whose name I am regretfully forgetting was just about to commit suicide because of the backlash, and we don't condone that at all, but Jar Jar is not a good character.
Yeah. It's the difference between we don't like the character and how it was portrayed. We're not saying anything bad about the actor. It's like people who get mad at Hayden Christensen for how he played Anakin.
Right.
Hayden did regardless of what you think, Hayden did a fantastic job of playing the character that he was told to portray.
Right.
If you have a problem with the character, take that up with George, and the people who run the series don't take that up with the actor who's simply doing his job and acting out the character he was told to act out.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's something that Star Wars fans in general need to learn.
Yes.
Though I will say George Lucas is not a great writer.
Ahmed Best was the actor
That's
for
right.
Jar Jar.
There's a clip I was wanting to try to find that I guess I failed to try to find, where Mark Hamill was talking about, he was on some sort of talk show, and he was talking about, like, there's a line that he begged George to cut. And he was like, we were passing an asteroid, and Han's like, we almost got blown up. And it was like this 4-paragraph line that explained why they almost didn't. And he goes, who talks like that, George? It's like,
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating.
Who talks like that, George? Now I'm wishing I'd grabbed the clip and I could have just had that as a reaction.
Who talks like that, George? That is great.
I'll find it for next week's episode. It'll be a reaction for that. You're witnessing the birth of a new through the monocle reaction.
Yeah. So kind of back on track with the movie. We were there. I'm forgetting some of the order of this, but we eventually get to. We have the captured Princess Leia. Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. Yeah.
What was that? Anyway, yes, captured. Wakanda forever. Yeah. Anyway, that.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. We got our boy Harrison Ford, who absolutely did not want to be there,
and continued to not want to be there all the way to the bank.
Continued to not want to be there for 40 years, all the way to the bank, until he finally got him to kill him off. If you don't know what we're talking about,
again.
Yeah, he did. If you don't know what we're talking about, Harrison Ford actively did not like playing Han Solo, to the point where when they had the prequels, or just the entire way, he was begging to have Han killed off. That's why he got frozen in the carbonite, because they didn't think he'd be coming back as Han. And then he came back for the money, presumably, and then they had to get him out of that. Then in the sequel trilogy, he was wanting to die, and he finally got his wish, and then came back.
As a favor to Carrie Fisher, which is honestly kind of noble. But it does.
It was good to see him back, and good to see him get his son to become good again. But that's also off track.
But it does give way to my all-time favorite satirical news headline. When asked about Han Solo's favorite color, Harrison Ford responds, "I wish George Lucas would die." Which obviously he didn't say, but it was hilarious regardless.
He did not say, however, it's absolutely something he was thinking.
Right, exactly. So we've got the captured space Princess Leia, who is being, I'm guessing, I think I know where you're going with this. We're on board the Death Star at this point, right? And continue. This is your
So they go, this is also kind of skipping a bit, but they go and rescue Leia, go down the trash chute into the trash can with the trash neck. They get out of there. They start getting through all the stuff. Han runs. Runs after him, sees all the people. Turns around and runs off. Eventually we get to the scene. The iconic scene, the one I mentioned earlier that we totally have no idea what I was talking about in the pre-spoiler one, where we have the Obi-Wan and Vader duel. Of course, this is nothing like any of the duels we see, especially in like the prequels. Those are just, say what you want about the prequels, you can't argue with the duels. Those are just top tier.
I I was going to mention that this duel does feel a little stale in comparison.
It does, but I mean, ultimately, the meaning behind the duel and the importance of it has nothing to do with the actual choreography and the duel itself. It's the meaning behind it. When we last met, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Yeah. And I'm not degrading
Only
the
a
meaning
master
at all.
of evil, Darth.
Right. I'm not degrading the meaning whatsoever.
Yay!
I'm just saying that like there was
Mm-hmm.
there were significant amounts of time that they were just standing there with the swords crossed, just staring at each other. And it's like,
Yeah, and then there's also obviously what I mentioned earlier. If you look back and Grant didn't know this, but if you go back and look how Obi-Wan's holding the lightsaber, you can see the cable or the wire or whatever that powered it just go down into his sleeve.
which is interesting because I wouldn't think there'd be a heck of a lot powering that because I believe it was mostly done in post.
I don't know exactly. I know it's there.
Yeah, I don't know how they did it either. That would be a good thing to know for our podcast. Yeah. So we can see Grant furiously typing.
Yes, I'm gonna see if I can find this picture.
Yeah, one of the things I liked is when Obi-Wan disappears, Vader walks up and just kicks the cloak, like he's searching for a body.
Yeah,
like somehow this old man's body is just gonna be like really small.
Yes,
it's hilarious to me. I also will say, if you can clearly see that line, George, you've already edited this thing 3 times. Is it really that hard?
It's as this is getting in a different universe, as my favorite Harry Potter character would say, it's pretty obvious. We've got this up on the screen. If you look at Obi-Wan's left hand, coming down out of the left hand is the wire that is then going into his right sleeve.
Oh wow, yeah, I just never noticed that.
Yeah, as my favorite Harry Potter character, Gilderoy Lockhart would say. He's not my favorite character. If you know Harry Potter, you would know he's an absolute moron. But it's pretty obvious that the cable's there.
Yeah, if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And
I'll put it back up. I mean, if you don't know what you're looking for, you won't see it. But if you know to look out of the left hand down in the right sleeve, you can see it.
And that's interesting. I'm curious how they did the lightsabers, though, and that would have been something I should have researched beforehand, but I didn't. So, how did they do them? The way it worked. So that's a video. I honestly don't know. I wish I could tell you. So it was a bright spotlight shining onto a thin wooden tube of reflective material.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I would not have expected that. I guess that's why sometimes it almost glows white.
Yeah, I think so.
Which I mean, maybe it is.
You can see actually it looks pretty good. I mean, obviously it looks better when they would go back and
Well, Obi-Wan's does, but if we're looking at like Luke's was definitely white when he first turned it on.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And then from there, of course, they get away. They go back to the Rebel base. We forgot to mention Alderaan going boom boom.
Yeah, that's where I thought you were going earlier. That's where I was leading to.
I was going to the fight. Alderaan go boom boom.
It do, which I will say, upon watching this, I had forgotten that we were going to Alderaan when it got exploded. Like, I'm just like, oh, well, I've forgotten that's what that original asteroid field was. It's a cool little detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like there's a whole planet missing.
Wow.
Pretty obvious.
It just got Plutoed. That's what happened to Pluto.
Yeah, I got Plutoed. Pluto got hit by the Death Star. The government's hiding that secret from us for legal reasons, and for just to clarify, the culture nerd does not believe that is true.
Right.
I need to make that clarification.
The opinions expressed on this show are not do not happen to be the opinions of those who employ us, but we all
nor
know
the opinions of those who claim to say them.
Right. We all know we faked the moon landing because the moon is really a Death Star that we used to blow up Pluto. Pluto doesn't really exist, and the ducks are free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Alderaan gets boomed, and then we go and we decide to get revenge. So apparently, and this is my favorite part about Star Wars, plot convenience is amazing. It's stronger than the Force. Like,
it really is. I mean, it's.
all right,
What's
guys.
the line? I forgot the line. What's the line? Oh no.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Yes, that's the line. I was actually about to mention that, by the way. I always thought it was a running gag because I knew Han had said it, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, I guess they're just quoting Han. I didn't realize that it was said like 2 or 3 times in this movie. Who talks like that, George?
George.
George.
George speaks his own language.
Georgese.
Yeah. I forgot where you were, I'm going to be honest.
I know exactly where I am. So, regardless, we're talking plot convenience, the Death Star. Hey, guys, we have this big old heavily armored fortress. Hey, but aren't we going to leave the air shaft open? Why? It's space. Where's it going to go? Well, I mean, who's going to attack it in a single passenger fighter? Who's going to do that? We are a big armored fortress, and they have single passenger fighters. Who's going to fight it in a single passenger fighter?
Yeah.
And then 2 torpedoes later, the whole thing. He didn't blow a chunk off of it. Apparently,
it went just boom boom as Alderaan. I mean, that sucker's gone.
Like, I want to know what that was attached to, that little ventilation shaft, because 2 torpedoes inside the armor is one thing. That's a big chunk blown off. Well, it must have been attached to like the battery.
It was attached to whatever it did. Oh, this is what it did. It was attached to the cannon. And so they were getting ready to launch the cannon and shoot the rebel base. And so what they did is they shot it and the thing blew up immediately instead of shooting out to the rebel base.
Is that the story? Because if so, that's even worse.
Because I believe that as Luke goes in to shoot it, they're getting ready to shoot. I forget what planet it's on.
Right. See,
but
you're right. They were. It was Yavin, I believe, was where. Anyway,
I think so.
Yeah, so they were getting ready to shoot it, but you can interpret that one of 2 ways. Number one, either the cannon exploded and blew up the Death Star.
Bloated up the Death Star.
It bloated up the Death Star. It done blowed up. I gotta find that. Anyway, regardless. So either it blew up the Death Star, or he just happened to save an entire planet by shooting it in at just that time. Regardless, that is the most plot convenient thing in the history of plot convenience.
Absolutely, yeah. Of course, they went on and retconned it with Rogue One of, the guy who designed it, I forgot his name, was a rebel sympathizer and left it open in the small chance that they could get the plans and get there and blow the thing up. I mean, come on.
Okay, regardless, even if they couldn't get the plan, like,
it's a load of horse dung, really, but...
So if they did intentionally leave it open, why not make it bigger? Why does it have to be a single...
It has to be so small because he didn't want it to be too obvious. I mean, if they knew of the thing, then he would have been yeeted earlier. But he couldn't make it so obvious that there was a design flaw. He couldn't have put like a red thing of, "Hey rebels, shoot this like 50,000 foot wide hole in the side of the Death Star." Shoot this like 30-mile wide hole. That math doesn't add up at all.
It does not.
It's like,
that's not even close.
That's what, 10 mile-ish wide hole in the Death Star. What does that have to do with anything?
I don't know. You guys do measurements.
That's cool. 5,280 feet in a mile. If anyone is still here, please comment that a mile is 5,280 feet.
If you're watching now, I laughed for about 4 minutes. Yeah. But yeah, so Rebel Sympathizer, which is obviously what George was thinking in 1977. He had that and Rey Skywalker already mapped out. The rest they were trying to figure out. Those two
Rey Star Wars.
Right. That's who it was named after. Though I will say I am very glad, that Jennifer Lawrence had starred in the Hunger Games so that we could get Carrie Fisher as Leia in this action movie, because otherwise we just wouldn't have female action stars. For those of you wondering, my esteemed co-host Jennifer Lawrence did an interview a couple weeks ago where she had said that she was the first action star. She was so happy. She was so glad. The first female action star. She was so glad that she could open that up for women. Yeah. So, yes. Anyway, we've blown up planets. We've blown up the Death Star. Now let's blow up your expectations. Grant, what are your thoughts? Do you think this movie meets our criteria?
I'm gonna have to think real long and hard about this one. No.
I don't think it's rewatchable, honestly.
No, not at all.
I really. No.
It's so obvious. It's pretty obvious that I can't even keep a straight face. It's great.
So for those of you who are curious, and we will get graphics made up of these eventually, when they happen, you should know our criteria, our rewatchability. Did it set out and accomplish or did it set out to do something and accomplish that goal? Is it just good or bad? I don't think that. I think those are our three criteria. That's it. I wrote them.
Overrated or
is it overrated?
Overhated, I think.
Yeah.
So for reference, I would say that the prequels are overhated.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Well, except for one. One deserves it. But half of one was a good movie, and the other half was Jar Jar. Anyway, regardless. So I personally think this one is honestly kind of underrated a little bit. Like, I think it is.
I would say so, because I think people unanimously agree 5 or 6 is the best one.
Right.
I mean, I would argue 3 is the best one. That's my opinion. But I think this is underrated in terms of, I don't think it's a classic. Everyone loves it, but I don't think anyone will sit down and say this is the best Star Wars movie.
See, the thing is, I think most people have seen it, right? Like I personally fell into this trap. I've seen this movie. And you think about it as you think about Star Wars and you think you've seen this one. But if you go back and watch this one as a movie, it is a very different thing than you think you saw.
Yeah.
So if you watch it 10 years from now, it's a very different thing than you actually saw because George is back behind the editing. Yeah. But I think that's most of the problem. I would also agree with you. I think 3 is possibly the best Star Wars movie, but not the best movie in Star Wars.
I would argue the best movie in Star Wars is Rogue One.
Okay. Why?
It just is.
I agree. I was just curious if you had
It just is. Because, I mean, if you look at it just simply as a movie and you disconnect it from Star Wars, and I know you're not really supposed to do that because it's part of a story, you would argue the same thing for your god-awful movie.
I'm not arguing that about Last Jedi anymore. They killed Last Jedi. I'm fine with Last Jedi being a dumpster fire now.
Okay. But I mean, just the way they do Rogue One, everything is just perfect. I mean, the Darth Vader scene at the end doesn't hurt. Okay, I'm biased. Okay, yeah. I love Darth Vader. Darth Vader is my favorite character. I tend to like the villains more. I'm that type of person. That doesn't hurt it. But just the storytelling throughout, it's dramatic when it needs to be, dark when it wants to be, and it's great. Now,
see, Rogue One is tonally this movie if it had a bigger budget and better CGI. Like, that's all it is. So I think this is arguably the best Star Wars movie if you just kind of take it like that. Now, it's not as Star Warsy as other Star Warsy movies.
Yeah.
But it's a good movie. And I think it's honestly quite underrated. I think we've gotten to that point. I think it's rewatchable. Do you think it's rewatchable, Grant?
Yes.
Would you sit through it again?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's 2 of our 4. Now, for the big kicker, the other criteria.
Well, the other one is that it set out. One of them is set out and do what it wanted to accomplish, and I would say no. It did far more than he set out to accomplish.
Yeah, it did.
So, no, but no in a good way. Like, as much as George, I would assume he really liked the movie. I don't know if even he realized just what that would start, because you have to think, you go back and there's been 8 movies in the main canon from that. There's been more, I don't know the exact number. There's been countless TV shows, and then those TV shows have been successes. Like there's 7 seasons of Clone Wars, and they're pretty long seasons. There's been multiple seasons of The Mandalorian, Bad Batch,
Video games.
video games.
There are 30-something video games.
Yeah. It's books, yeah.
It's nuts.
Comics, so much. There's no way George had this in mind.
No, but
I'm sure he had a bit of a universe in mind. There's no way he had. I mean, obviously he didn't have like Grogu in mind, but in terms of how big this thing could get, as optimistic as you think he would be, there's no way he thought it could get anywhere close to this big.
Personally, I think George was meditating in the summer of 1976, and he's like, I see 3 things. I see Rogue One, Rey Skywalker, and Baby Yoda. Who's Yoda? I don't know, but baby.
Can I remove him from this?
No, you can't.
I can. Hello, everyone. I have cut him off.
I'm back. Anyway, so StreamYard controls aside. Where I was going with that is movie-wise, I think it accomplished a little under what he anticipated it being. Part of that was the monetary restriction. Like, I think that's why he's gone back and cut it and cut it and cut it and cut it and added. And
yeah. I mean, in terms of the movie itself, I think there's more that he wishes he could have done at the time, but I don't think he could have at all anticipated the impact. Like, there's no way.
Oh, no, for sure. The impact is its own thing entirely. And yes, it has significantly overachieved in that aspect. I'm saying from a film perspective, I think there were things he wished he could have done. But I don't know that we necessarily see those. Like, I don't think it hurts that the universe isn't established.
Yeah, and I would argue, like, wished he could have done. I mean, you could argue that with just about any movie, that they wish they could have had some technology. I mean, our boy James Cameron had to wait like a decade to get the technology. He needed it twice for Avatar.
Yeah, and it still wasn't good. But that's
I haven't seen 2. I've heard good things about it, but
I've heard good things about all of them. But I bothered to sit through 1 and didn't like it. So anyway, well, that's a conversation for another day. Maybe we should talk about Avatar. Avatar needs to be added to the list.
Avatar will probably be one of the like fill-in episodes.
Sounds good to me. Anyway, so things. So, like we've said, you think it did more than it set out to do. I think it did a little bit less film-wise.
I'm not talking about film-wise. I'm talking about the impact. And yes. I get what you're saying film-wise, of course, but you could say that with every movie. Like, I bet if they could go back to like, I don't even know, like Iron Man 1, there are things they wish they could do now. Like Marvel wishes they could do now that they couldn't have done then.
I'm not talking about which they could have done now. I'm talking about there were things that he wanted to do at the time that he was unable to due to money. And I think that is something that he didn't quite get to do. But I still think that don't get me wrong, I think it accomplished his overall goal of being this space Western. I think it's a fantastic space Western. I just think there were things he wished he could have done at the time when he did it. And I think that's why he keeps going back.
Do this so we're back on the right sides.
Right.
So yeah, I get that. We're coming at that from different perspectives,
and that's why people listen to both of us.
Yeah,
it's not because we're both named Grant.
Yeah. So then our last criteria, the most important of all, pass or fail.
I think it passes. I think it is overall a fantastic movie. Now, for those of you curious, the reason I chose to do pass fail versus a letter grade is I feel like most of the time when you're watching a classic movie, you're going to give it a higher letter grade than you are one that you know wasn't reviewed very well. Right. This would be an S tier on our other show, Much Talk About Nothing, but Much Talk About Nothing. But
I'll let Grant talk about the other reason, probably why he made it a pass fail, not a letter grade. I
don't know. You're gonna have to spell it out for him, Grant.
Was it Tombstone?
It was not Tombstone. Actually, I much prefer low letter grades.
So, for anyone who's here that has not seen our other show, I doubt anyone's still here at this point. But if you are, here's a little tidbit of information. Probably like a year or 2 ago, we did a review of Tombstone. And the film, yes. I gave it, I think it was a C or a C plus.
I thought you C plussed it, yeah.
I think I C plussed it. My mom listened to that episode and got mad at me for me giving it a C+.
Because he's wrong.
Look, I give you my honest opinion. I thought it was all right.
But the thing is, like...
So that's why we're doing pass-fail, because if we do that, Grant, I'm going to get murdered by the culture nerd audience, and we don't want that.
Well, he doesn't.
Grant wants that. Grant's trying to get rid of me secretly, so he's hoping that I get murdered by the audience so he can get rid of me. But no, this pass. I give this like a C-, but still a pass. It's not a D. It's an S.
No, but the reason I just want to make clear, the reason we're doing this is we are reviewing intentionally movies that we know are hated on a large scale.
Some of them.
Right. But if we were to watch, say, Cowboys and Aliens and give it a C, the rest of you are going to go out here, well, that's another person who doesn't like Cowboys and Aliens. Whereas if I watch it and give it a pass, that's a very different grade.
Yeah, and a C is a passing grade. I mean,
Right.
we're both college students. If you get a C, you pass. If you get a D,
C's get degrees, but they don't get you in transfer spots. Anyway, yeah, I think we both agree that this is a very good movie, and it almost feels like a spinoff, right? Like once you see the other 10 of them, it almost feels like they went in and spun off of it with these 3 people from episode 5 and 6. I like it.
Yeah.
It works.
Mm-hmm.
I wish you could do more of it, right? Like it's one of those things you can never quite hit that well again. I wish they could, but it passed. So thank you. Grant, you have anything else to say?
No.
All right. So thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of our cycle. If you enjoyed the show, please go support our Patreon. That is patreon.com/theculturednerd. And if you want to support us specifically, you can do that by just clicking on that little through the Monocle button once you get there, and it'll let you throw your money at the screen. As always, I've been your host, Grant Ingram.
And I've been your co-host, Grant Skillen. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who are listed on the screen. And thank you to Jose Navarro for our logo.
Yep, and thank you so much for joining us. Please leave a like and subscribe. Scan the QR code on the left for The Cultured Nerd, and scan the QR code on the right for our other show, Much Talk About Nothing. See you next week when we discuss John Carter of Mars.